Hey everyone, this is Garrett, your favorite root vegetable, joined here with Keith, the Bittensor guru, as many of you may know, but on here he is the stick, and we are the carrot and the stick. We here for our second episode ever, right before Christmas. We just got it in before Christmas break. Merry Christmas, everyone, and Merry Christmas, Keith.
Yeah, I suggest everyone celebrate this Christmas by, last minute gift. Tao is on sale. So pick some up for, your friends, your loved ones, your future children, anyone that you can conceive of wanting to go to the moon at some point. Right now, we're not quite doing it, but, prices are advantageous for gift giving at this time.
Amen. So if you need some last minute stocking stuffers, download the Tao.com app and get your Tao today.
Yeah, just put the 12 or 24 word, phrase right in there and right in the stocking. It's a great idea.
I wish I got that in my stocking, but oh well. But maybe Santa will be good to me this year. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, we have an interesting docket here. Let's start with talking about anti-MEV, and then after that, we'll talk about Bittensor 2026. We're here at the end of the year, just about right before Christmas here. It's a great opportunity to talk about where Bittensor should go in 2026 and kind of what that means for the future of the ecosystem, and just kind of our own personal hopes and dreams for the future of the ecosystem. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Let's talk about anti-MEV. And before we talk about anti-MEV, we have to talk about MEV. What is MEV? That's a new concept for people that are not crypto native. I know that I had to Google that one when I first heard conversations around it. But what MEV is, and to be clear, MEV is MEV, which is maximal extracted value. And what that means is
sounds dangerous already.
I know. It's scary, and especially for those of us who are not super crypto native. I come from the AI background, and so I was introduced to crypto through Bittensor. So for me, stuff like this is pretty scary. But essentially, what it meant is that people could take advantage of the ordering of transactions within a block and use that to their advantage to make trades. So in a DTAO context, in a context where people are buying and selling subnets and alpha tokens, they could see a large transaction or a whale or somebody that's making a large transaction on the chain within a block. They could essentially buy, like let's say that someone's going to buy a whole bunch of alpha, and it's a large whale who's gonna buy this. You could sneak your transaction in right before theirs at a lower price. They buy, then because they're a whale, they bought so much that the price goes up a reasonable amount, and then you can sell right after that. You can do this essentially within a single block. So you have your transaction, their transaction, and then your other transaction, right after. And so what this did is it allowed for people to optimize this buying and selling by just squeezing in and sneaking in your transactions in just right in between these whales or these large buys and sells. And it's great for them. It's great for just getting every cent they can out of the DTAO trading market. But it's not really following the ethos of what trading is all about. It's not really about making a statement or placing your vote on a subnet. It really is just a way to extract as much value as possible. And so this is important that we this is important from an ecosystem perspective because this is just bleeding the ecosystem with profits and ultimately with alpha with these traders who are maybe not participating as much in the ecosystem. It looks like we lost Keith here. We'll see if he comes back. I didn't realize it was that boring of a topic, but okay. All right, he's back. Um, no, all right.
Sorry
So,
about that.
no worries. So, anti-MEV is the ability to prevent people from sneaking their transactions in and taking advantage of block ordering in order to extract as much value as possible. So how do we do that? How is that even possible that you could prevent that behavior? And it really comes down to encryption. You want to hide transactions and prevent, especially like the whales and like these big players in Bittensor that are making these big moves. Maybe they're companies that are making big buys and sells. You know, big things are happening, and it'd be great if those movements um, could be hidden temporarily so that nobody could identify them and then sneak in their investments, you know, around them, and optimize that that trade. And so how this is done is a bit tricky because when you're operating on a blockchain, you need to be decentralized, but you're also open. Anybody can see inside the blocks, and those blocks have to be finalized by the chain validators. And so all blocks, as they go through finalization, they are approved by what are called the chain validators that operate the blockchain. And so it's a bit tricky to encrypt these transactions. And so how it works is the block author or the chain validator that is creating the block will create a encryption key as well for the next block. And anybody that wants to encrypt their transaction, they can pull that key and say, okay, uh, you know, ask the chain validator, what is that encryption key? And they can use that key to encrypt their extrinsic, which an extrinsic is just an operation that you're doing on chain. So it could be a buy, it could be a sell, it could be a transfer, it could be whatever. And you can encrypt that using the key that was given to you by the chain validator. And then once you submit that, that gets entered into the mempool. It's completely covered. Nobody knows what's in it. Only the chain validators can decrypt it. And then they do decrypt it in the next block, and then they execute what was in that payload, that encrypted payload. And so this prevents MEV because the MEVers, the people that are trying to extract as much value as possible, they will just see the transactions on chain as just encrypted blobs. They don't know who's buying what. They don't know how much. They don't know any of the details. They just know that something was submitted on chain. And so it's really difficult for them to try to place their trades to optimize that. And by the time that the decryption happens, it's too late. And so this has really been a big feature on Bittensor. It's something that's pretty cutting edge. We don't see this on a lot of other blockchains. I know that there's some pushes on the Ethereum side to get this in there, but this is really a good demonstration of the advancement of Bittensor and the preparation of Bittensor for scale and for being more robust. So that's the spiel on anti-MEV, and that's a little bit on why that matters.
Yeah, personally, I've seen these MEV bots, you know, and people set this up so that you've got these automated crawlers with a certain amount of tau like at their disposal. So based on the buy that's happening, you might wake certain bots up, you know. So if some whale comes in and tries to drop 100 tau in a single shot, a bot may come in and front run them for a couple hundred tau. And like I think if you're thinking about this from a trading perspective, the sandwich just means like they buy before you and they leave after you buy, so you create the value for them, and they essentially do that as many times as possible over and over. And where I would specifically notice it, and we don't have these type of days as much anymore, but if you go back to dynamic tau, you know, especially in the first like 3 months up until really April or May, new subnets or developments or whatever was just like throwing chum in the water for these things. And you would see these buys come in and there'd be 20 or 30 bots like trying to get in all on top of each other and stuff, and then all trying to sell faster. And it was just like, if you're watching and you would have no idea this is going on unless you're actually watching the transaction logs, you know, of these various subnets. And like, I don't know what the exact number is, but I would bet every tau that I have that it's easily 5 figures in tau. that has been, extracted from the community over this time. And the reason I think why this is so special that we can put this fix in at this time is that like Garrett said, not many blockchains are agile enough or have the ability to put this kind of thing in without a real extensive either like rewrite or governance thing. So like while there might be some pushback on how Bittensor is managed at the moment, the ability to get these kind of changes in relatively quickly, I would say is like one of the huge advantages of BitTensor's, evolutionary track at the moment and governance track at the moment. So you can have your gripes about it, but this is one of the wins. And for actually one of the things I want to ask you, Garrett, is how can people take advantage of this? Because if you just use your tried and true method, maybe if you're swapping, I don't know, with the BT CLE or whatever, I mean, you don't automatically get the MEV protection, right?
Right. So the way that it's implemented on chain is an opt-in model. And the reason why we want this to be opt-in, even though we would expect most people to want encryption, is really to make sure that this is a non-breaking change. And what we mean by that is that tools that are already interacting with Bittensor, they do not fail or break by requiring this new encryption key. Because there's an additional step here. You have to ask the chain validator for the encryption key, then you have to encrypt, and then you can send the payload. And we didn't want to make that a requirement of people, but we did want to make that really easy. And so I know the folks over at Latent Holdings have been working on the Python SDK, and they've been adding features in so that people can do this themselves. But for most people, you are going to get anti-MEV protection right off the bat, out of the box with the Tau.com app. That's something that we've been working on under the hood to make sure that you get the MEV protection that you need with the Tau.com app. And I know that there are other apps as well in the space that are also doing the exact same thing. So I would expect most client tools to implement MEV protection as standard for all extrinsics. And it's something that I think for the average holder, the encryption and decryption cycle, yes, it might expand the time of execution by a block or so, but I think that's a very worthwhile trade-off for most people.
Yeah, and you might think like maybe you're just kind of a, smaller holder and you're like, oh, I'm just swapping in half a tau. I've seen this stuff happen on as little as like a quarter of a tau. It doesn't need to be some big 3-digit, 2-digit tau buy in a single shot. These things will, especially now that the targets are thinning, it's not as target. It's not a target rich environment anymore, since probably the bigger players are moving towards the anti-MEV or have already done it. They're going to take what they can get, so they're going to target the smaller. And it used to be like you could make a bunch of buys under a certain threshold and avoid waking up the bots because it wasn't worth it, because they have a limited amount of tau and there's 128 subnets, so they're not going to target you if there's bigger fish to fry over there with the limited amount of tau that they have available. But now at this point, I'd say like pretty much anything is fair game. So on the app that you use, you want to make sure you're getting that protection, because just because the MEV's there doesn't mean the bots are gone.
Yeah, exactly. The bots are still going to be waiting there trying to strike on anybody who's not using this encryption. And this is something that like I think is a little bit of a social movement of like let's standardize and normalize using encryption. But we're already seeing the tools integrating this. So I think that for most people, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're wondering like, hey, am I protected? If you're using the Tau.com wallet or if you're using standard tools, if it's not there yet, it almost certainly will be as standard. I can't speak for every tool on the ecosystem, but it's definitely something that you will get as standard. But if you're writing a script or if you're writing code in Python or something like that, you're using the SDK, then you will want to follow the steps that they have outlined there to make that happen. I know that they've done a great job. The team there at Latent has done a great job making that possible. So that's the anti-MEV feature, and that's why it's important. I know there was another kind of amendment to that was pushed last Friday as well, that basically just made sure that EVM smart contracts couldn't take advantage of priority as well, because there was a little bit of some goofiness there where even they could still MEV the decrypted transactions in the next block. That's been solved. So so far, the anti-MEV feature has been pretty dang successful, and really want to give a hats off to the OTF team for putting that together. I actually want to call out John specifically. John, you know who you are. He is the developer that was leading the charge on that feature. And this is one of the smoothest rollouts I think that we've had, and it's been just a huge positive impact with really no downsides. You're not really giving up anything by participating in this, except for the time it takes to wait for the decryption, which is a non-issue for most people. So I think it's one of the best features that Bittensor's introduced this year, post DTAO. And it's really just sets the tone moving into the new year with the preparation of Bittensor for scale and for the building of trust, is that, hey, now you can trade on Bittensor and not worry about, is all my value going to get lost in some MEV operation where I get sandwich attacked. That's really important for this ecosystem. And I just think that that's really the energy we got to carry with us into 2026.
Yeah, you want your biggest players to be confidently swapping into these subnets, and this is a critical feature in order to bring that confidence to them. So it's completely necessary for us to, move forward with really the next phase of dynamic Tau. And I also want to highlight at this point as well that the MEV anti-MEV is one thing, and it for sure solves a specific attack vector there. But what you really shouldn't underestimate is the ability for pattern recognition on your trading activities to be front run by bots, because people will spend the time in order to identify the things that you're doing. And I've done some experiments myself and added into a subnet with a specific wallet and then unstaked a little bit of Tau like a day or two later. And I'll see certain bots try to beat me into the subnets that I was swapping into. So just because you have your anti-MEV on doesn't mean you need to let your guard down. And what you might want to do, especially if you're a larger trader, and I suspect that some of those are going to be listening to this podcast, you might want to start monitoring those type of activities and keep an eye on those transaction logs when you're making moves with your staking and unstaking of Tau, and especially if there's quite a bit of lead time in between that and the actual transaction of the buy itself, because people are out there making bets on not just these subnets, but they're making bets on what you're going to do with your Tau, trying to take advantage of everything that they can. So, keep your eyes open as you enter dynamic Tau.
It's a great word of caution. And yeah, I think that especially if you do a lot of trading, this is not a call to just drop your guard entirely, but it is a great tool in the tool shed, and very thankful for it. But let's carry that energy into 2026. Let's shift gears here and talk about Bittensor in 2026. What are the top hopes and dreams that we have for Bittensor as a protocol? What do we want to see in the ecosystem? What are we looking forward to that we know is coming? And how is that going to positively impact the ecosystem? So I'll volunteer to go first. Big moments of Bittensor for 2026, in my mind, center around chain governance and chain decentralization. As many of you may know, OpenTensor, the foundation, has been operating the chain validators that make up the Bittensor blockchain. And that's been very purposeful and very necessary up to this point. And it's been great that the foundation has that flexibility as the operator of those nodes, that they can make changes as needed quickly. But as we grow as an ecosystem, as we mature, in Bittensor, and as we prepare for this massive scale and build trust, it's important that we share the responsibility of operating not just the subnets, not just the economy, but the chain itself across multiple different parties. And the team at OpenTensor has been working hard on a nominated proof of stake, or NPOS, model for chain decentralization. And they've been recruiting the top validators in the ecosystem to become not just subnet validators, but chain validators. And we've been participating in that on our end, and I know that other folks in the community have as well. And it's been going really positively. And that's a big change that's coming next year.
What
And
does that mean as a chain what does that mean, like, from a hardware perspective? Like, how does that actually get executed?
yeah, that's great. So, great question. So, right now we operate off of what's called proof of authority. And there are 20 node or chain validator nodes. And the chain validator nodes are the ones that are responsible for creating blocks and verifying each other's blocks and then finalizing them in the blockchain. And so those 20 nodes are the definitive authorities for Bittensor. So if they don't agree that something happened, it didn't happen. And they're the ones that are actually sharing with each other the knowledge of the blocks and whatnot. They're all operated together. They're all operated essentially in unison, but there are 20 nodes. And as we move forward to NPOS, other parties will be added to that 20 node pool. So let's say our validator was added, so that'd be 21. You could have, who knows what other companies could be added. Let's say that there's a total of 30 maybe, or 40 nodes that are now being part of this. And that gets switched to a NPOS, or nominated proof of stake system, which means that we're not declaring that every single node is an authority on block authoring, block verification, but we're making it based on stake weight. Very much in the same way that subnet validation has been based on stake weight, where validators that have larger stake weight have a bigger say in miner emissions. This is going to be the same thing for block finalization in Bittensor. And so on a technical level, what this will mean is that the actual hardware that runs Bittensor, it finalizes blocks, is going to be distributed across multiple regions and multiple companies, and it shares the responsibility of running the Bittensor chain across multiple entities, which will create a hardening effect for us, where you don't have a single point of failure. You don't have one party that is wholly responsible for the operation. Functionally speaking, for most people, there will be no discernible difference, except for the introduction of gas fees, or some sort of transaction fee that's going to be slightly augmented from what we experience today. We already have transaction fees in Bittensor, but those will be slightly augmented to help cover the cost of the chain validators. So right now, OpenTensor basically, they pay for the operation of the chain right now, funded by their subnet validator. But that cost is going to be shared across multiple parties, and there needs to be economic incentive to get them to participate. And that's where that design will come in. And I don't think anybody has a solid idea of exactly what that's going to look like, but that's something I'm looking forward to figuring out in 2026. But I know from a technical perspective, the actual decentralization of the chain is possible. And there is a kind of side chain, there's a test chain that has been created, and that's been operating smoothly with multiple participants.
What does this practically mean for a investor or participant in Dynamic Tau, that we go from 20 of these nodes run by OpenTensor to 30 or 40 half run by OpenTensor currently, or whatever, and then the other basket run by not random, but the top validators? What does that mean, like, for the project?
Yeah, I think that if you are a participant in DTAO, you're a trader or a miner, you're a validator, what have you. Ideally, you won't really notice a whole lot different. If we do our job well, not a lot will change, except for just the operations of things might cost a little bit more in terms of gas fees. Might become kind of Ethereum-like, But aside from that, there's going to be effectively no operational difference. But what this means for an outside investor who is kind of analyzing Bittensor and trying to discover if this is really all it's chalked up to be, decentralizing the chain, it does a lot for us. It one, distributes the responsibility across multiple parties. So now this is no longer just OpenTensor's project that we're all a part of. This is a project that we all have mutual ownership of as chain validators. And so that will give investors a lot more confidence that Bittensor is robust, Bittensor is ready for scale. The other thing is that it changes the classification of Bittensor legally in the eyes of the SEC or whatever department is relevant depending on the jurisdiction. But a chain that is operated solely by one party versus a chain that's operated decentralized, they are classified differently, and that could affect taxes, that could affect regulations in terms of what can and can't be done. So there is a financial/legal end of this that could be improved by the chain being decentralized. But functionally speaking, in terms of your day-to-day operations, it'll be all quiet on the Western Front.
Now we're on this pod to ask the hard questions. I'm looking at the top validators here, and currently the top validator on Bittensor is Tau.bot. I don't personally, I know every top team I have personal experience with except that one. The thing that I know about them is that they'll deploy any method possible in order to essentially extract the maximal rewards for their validator, and they've essentially made a business of this on Bittensor. What do we do when we have someone like that at the top of our heap, and should we be giving them the power to authenticate transactions on the chain, and are we giving that to them? Like what's happening with that? What risks are we introducing here?
Right. So since we haven't rolled out anything yet, and so this is obviously a bit hypothetical, but it is a proof of stake system, but it's not completely permissionless. That's something that's very purposeful, is that it's not in the same way that you can register a miner and start mining. You can't just register a chain validator and start chain validating. This is something that is going to involve trusted parties, especially to start. And I think that will filter out parties that are more extractive, that are not necessarily in it for the good of Bittensor, that are more just in it for the good of APY. So that's should be a little bit more comforting in the sense of, yes, it's a nominate proof of stake system, but getting into that system is not entirely permissionless. That is something that I know OpenTensor is thinking about very carefully, about who to let into that, and what that should look like. Now, long term, we're talking years down the road, maybe it does become permissionless. But at this moment in time, the rollout of nominated proof of stake has to be really crisp and clean, and we don't want inconsistencies with the chain. We don't want any exploits to happen. That's just not what Bittensor is about. And so that rollout is going to be very careful. And that's what can filter out these types of parties.
Yeah. There's this idea that like the chain should allow for full decentralization. And obviously the goal of everybody involved in this is to work towards that over time. And Bittensor has done a great job of increasing the decentralized aspect, and will continue to do that next year. But this project is actually built on relationships foundationally. And that's what keeps us solid through these tough times like we're experiencing now, is the trust between some of these parties. And I think there is, a way over time to use technology to augment that or replace that in certain ways. But it's comforting to me to know that those things will continue to have value into the future, because those are, things that have been cultivated over years of basically being a good actor in the ecosystem, and people have earned, the right to participate in this project in that way through contributing in many different ways. And so I think it's a fantastic development, and I like the approach.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great segue to talk about my other wish list item, which is chain governance. And that is like, okay, so chain decentralization, like here's a cool thing that has a bunch of um, advantages for us, but who do we let into that, and what does that mean? And you mentioned relationships. I think that's key. That's key for any human-based ecosystem. Is relationships play a big role, and there's a social element to Bittensor that is just as big as the code element. Um, there's a culture here. People come into Bittensor, and people don't leave Bittensor, and there's a reason for that. Everyone sticks around in some form or fashion. They might shift, they might change what they're doing from time to time. They might become a miner and then the validator, and then maybe they try their hand at subnet ownership. But whatever it is, they stick around. And there's a culture that unites us together. And that's a big part of this picture as well. And that's something that we shouldn't forget, which is a great segue into governance, because that is the on-chain mechanism for how we come to agreement as a community for changes to the blockchain. As some of you may know, there is a Senate today, and that Senate is what voted to approve the DTAO upgrade that brought us this market-driven system of subnet emissions. We also have the triumvirate, which is the group of 3 individuals that have what are called the pseudo keys, and any 2 of the 3 keys can approve a chain upgrade. So any time that the blockchain, the Bittensor chain, needs to be changed, hotfixed, just modified in any way, or a new feature gets added, anything like that, it has to go through the triumvirate. And so there's a new governance model that's currently in the works that is going to change a little bit about how this works in a way that makes the community voice heard in a much clearer way. And what this does is it expands the Senate to not just be 1, but to be 2 houses, of 1 being subnet owners and 1 being of validators. And this will allow each house to vote on proposals on the blockchain and eventually on triumvirate seats as well. The triumvirate seats, right now they're permanent seats, but they can continue to stay in those seats, but they can have opportunities to be replaced in elections in the future if the community so desires. And that's where this becomes really interesting, because for one, it allows for proposals on chain to either be fast-tracked, slowed down, or canceled by the will of the community after it has already passed the triumvirate. And that makes this really interesting as an ecosystem, because now all of a sudden trust can then increase on that front, because now we can see that, okay, if a change has been fast-tracked, it's because it has been verified by the will of the 2 houses. And that gives a lot more confidence in the chain upgrade than just a single entity or even just a triumvirate. And this is all about building trust. So what does this look like? So I'll walk through the kind of the basics of what this mechanism would look like. There are some things that are still being designed and figured out, so I don't want to go too much into the nitty-gritty details. But the basic process is that when the blockchain team comes up with a change, they can propose that to the triumvirate. The triumvirate can approve that with a 2/3 vote, just like they do today. But instead of instantly being put on chain like it is today, it would go into a waiting period. And in that waiting period, the members of the houses would have opportunities to vote. And if 2/3 of the votes are yes, then the waiting period is over and the change immediately goes into effect, and you don't have to wait any longer. However, every nay vote extends the waiting period by a little bit more, and every additional nay vote extends by even more than the previous nay vote, until eventually, if there are 50% of the votes being nay, the proposal is canceled permanently. So what this allows is it allows parties to say, hey, I want to delay an upgrade so that our team has more time to review it. Or it allows people to say, hey, this is really important. I think we should just rally the troops and we should just get this out. We don't have to wait during the waiting period. Um, and it's a pretty interesting design. And when you combine this with triumvirate seats that can rotate and that can be elected, if the triumvirate is a reflection of this democratization of the ecosystem, as well as the houses that represent the top subnets and validators, you get a governance model that can move pretty quickly, but can also um, either trust or not trust a given change and execute that and enforce that on chain. And that's something that I think is going to it's going to give people that much more peace of mind whenever something new comes along, because then it's not just the Open Tensor Foundation blockchain team. It's not just the triumvirate. It's actually a whole body of top players in the ecosystem, and it gives them a chance to kind of opine and kind of review. And I think that's one of my favorite things that is coming in 2026, and I just can't wait.
It's going to be great. I'm going to have my popcorn ready for all this stuff because it's going to bring all of these conversations into the public forum, especially with introducing, more visibility to who's actually holding those triumvirate keys, which is currently tau.com/Tensora, Latent, and Crucible, right? And then also, of course, introducing the subnet owners. It's gonna be a really interesting like development for Bittensor, and I can't wait to see like the different sort of like factions that form around this. You know, you have this in every country that has some sort of democratic system. You've got like parties, and Bittensor, I think, will develop something similar where alliances are kind of made around lines drawn on the chain of what things should be implemented, what shouldn't, and then you have these sort of like relationships that are formed around it and groups that are formed around it. And then, once again, this also really increases, I would say, the responsibility of the Tau holders themselves to be, selecting the right subnets, keeping them alive, staking to the right validators. All of those decisions have then downstream impacts long term on which direction that Bittensor develops. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, Keith, what are your hopes and dreams and needs and wants for Bittensor 2026?
I wrote down a couple things that came to mind immediately. So one would be deregistrations continue at a healthy pace. I love to see that wood chipper, turn on and start rotating out those subnets that we don't feel like are, should be keeping those slots. So that's something that I'm looking forward to. And honestly, the ecosystem needs it. We need a little bit of a refresher on some of this, on sort of the subnet landscape at this point. And the deregistrations are the way that happens. So I'm excited to kind of watch that whole process play out. The other thing that I'm looking forward to, and we're seeing some subnets successfully do this already, but the productization of their commodities, whether it's, these traditional kind of like infrastructure commodities or whether it's more of the intelligence commodity route. Either way, I am excited to see subnets now releasing lots of different news about real things that they've created in the world. I guess one of the most recent ones that just came across was that the 404 Gen team at Subnet 17 won a competition with like thousands of entries.
I saw that.
Yeah. So then it was like narrowed down to 11 or 12, and then they won that shortlisted competition. So like that was really an amazing win for Bittensor, built upon the contribution of miners over the course of over a year. They've been kind of building this, I guess you'd call it almost like a library of these different objects that can be used to build, animated worlds. So that was a really impressive thing that I saw recently. And I can't wait to continue to see true productization of the output, of the contributors of Bittensor. So Yeah, that's something that I think we've all been waiting for that, and we see some of the
Mhm.
top subnets already doing it. But to continue to see that happen into, outside of really the top 20, and to subnets being successful in gaining some market share, I think is the second thing I
Mhm.
want to see. Like outside of just the productization, I want to see like multiple percentage points. Let's get some double-digit percentage points, not just powering Open Router, but I want to see like actual, I want to see the Pac-Man start eating some of some of the centralized players. And I think we're getting close to that. One thing that helps is we're seeing, in my opinion, we're seeing the gap close. The parity is becoming closer and closer between decentralized and centralized models, or the open source, essentially, movement versus the closed source movement. And as the difference between these models, gets harder and harder to identify, and the performances across the various benchmarks, it's not going to be like, oh, we scored 94% and they scored 55%. It's going to be, we scored 94 and the open source scored 92.5, and the average person's
Mhm.
not going to know the difference. And then the things that make the open source projects like Bittensor and all of our subnets special, I think will continue to close the gap between that percentage and actually make us more attractive, whether it's because we're cheaper or faster, or because we're developed without, various, I don't know, leanings in certain political directions, or whatever the
Mhm.
gripes we have with the centralized players. So that's another one that I've got. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that, like, for one, 404 has a special place in my heart. This is not financial advice, by the way. Has a special place in my heart because I used to dabble in 3D modeling and animation back in the day, and so seeing, like, okay, they've got the Blender plugin, they've got they made that game. That just, it's inspiring. I don't want to comment too much about any particular subnet, but like that's an example of breaking out into the centralized world and showing that BitTensor is actually an advantage. It's not like, I think a lot of people have this perception after getting into the subnet game that, like, oh, the subnet is their entire, like, life and focus, and like it's difficult to think about productizing sometimes, especially for like research-based subnets. We were on the podcast with Grant yesterday, talking about kind of research-based versus product-based subnets. But I think that there's a solution there in subnets working together. Um, and through that, then together they can defeat the centralized versions of whatever it is they're producing. And I think that the incentives will naturally position us to constantly be optimizing as far as something can be optimized. And we'll see if the centralized players can catch up with that. That's a rate of improvement that um, is significant. I mean, they have a head start with us, but the rate of improvement of BitTensor subnets is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I continue to enjoy the watching the charts as subnets are rewarded for things that they've achieved, not things that they've promised. And
Mm-hmm.
as you look back on the last 10 months or so, many of the price movements that we've all seen happen are based upon, here's what we're going to do, and then speculative, sort of investment. Obviously, everything is sort of a speculative investment in crypto, but it's a difference between like betting on the horse race a week before the thing starts versus like being, a couple furlongs into the thing and seeing where those different subnets are separating themselves from the pack. So I love to see like the real stuff happening that then the average person can like go play that game
Mm-hmm.
and like get their hands on the outputs of BitTensor and then make their investment decisions based upon that. Because in my opinion, that's how most people, if they're not just pumping, money into their company 401k, they make their financial decisions based upon, things that, a lot of them based on things that they use and things that work
Mm-hmm.
well for them. And then they want to invest in those, or things that solve problems that they have, and as BitTensor subnets become better at achieving and doing those things, I think we'll continue to see separation, of the real subnets from the pretenders, and that makes me happy because the more that happens, the more we're all going to benefit in the long run from investing in BitTensor.
Yep.
I would add one more thing to my list that I'm looking forward to next year, and that's Exploit in San Francisco. We've needed an event in San Francisco, whether you think San Francisco's dead and everybody moved to Austin, or I don't know, whatever people think at this point. Let's at least get one good event in San Fran before it, get burns to the ground or whatever. So we're going to do that next year, March 30th and 31st. And I'm looking forward to getting in front of everybody and meeting all the different people. Austin was great earlier this year. And I think there's no substitute for meeting people in the flesh. So that's a really special thing that I think is coming up.
I completely agree with that. I've been to a couple of Bittensor events at this point, and um, it is such a different experience to see people in real life. There's people that you can work with for years even without ever seeing in person, and it's just different when you meet them in the flesh. You get to know the real them, not just the person that they kind of put up online, and I think that's just it makes BitTensor as a culture that much more special. Because we've got like this synergy in BitTensor that is, I think, pretty unique. And so when everyone comes together in person, it's just like the energy there is just like insane. Yeah, Austin was great. And real thanks for all the guys that put that together. Good to just see all kinds of miners, validators, subnet owners, all kinds of people, and all in one big area, just chatting and breaking bread together, and listening about what each other is cooking up. It was just great, and in some ways that was the foreshadowing of this pod, where Keith and I got to be on stage for a moment, and that was really cool. But yeah, so and the exploit summit in March. Be there or be square. It's gonna be great. But
And go
yeah,
meet your validator. Go shake their hand. Go meet the team that developed the wallet that you use every day and look them in the eye. Go talk to the subnet owner. Go meet their lead dev if they're there. And if you have people that, you're looking to meet and they're not there, maybe you need to ask yourself why. Because we've got a lot of lead time up to this one, and it's just another tool that you can use in order to determine where to place your bets in this project, and how to operate, which wallets to use, the whole thing. And it's irreplaceable, so don't miss it, because it's something that you'll remember for a very long time when this project makes the moves we all know it's going to make.
Completely agree. So yeah, 2026 it's gonna be a really big year for BitTensor. I think this is going to be the year where we really harden the ecosystem, and get ready for that massive adoption, massive scale. 2025 was a year where we just completely redefined BitTensor with DTAO, with TAOflow, etc. Dynamic TAO really just, it seems like ages ago now. We're so used to it now. Like, how could BitTensor have been anything but DTAO? But really, 2025 was the year where DTAO happened. It was the year of redefining BitTensor. It was the year of kind of introducing an even greater, almost Cambrian explosion of subnets, where we have double the amount of subnets, and it would have been more if not for the subnet limit, which I think goes into another question of how many subnets should there be and when should that limit increase. But we can talk about that later. But 2025 was a really big year. There are a lot of things that were very foundational for BitTensor's success, and now the focus is going to be on hardening that ecosystem, patching the holes, decentralizing the chain, getting governance ready, all of that to build the solid platform that is BitTensor to a point where people can come in here and they can build their business, they can build their subnet, and it is a solid platform to build on. So I think it's going to be a really great year. I think there's a lot to do. I think that there's a lot that we as a community have already gotten a head start on, in typical BitTensor fashion. Nobody ever sleeps around here. Lots is already being done, but 2026 is going to be a big year.
I agree. I think that's a great ending.
I agree. Well, guys, thank you for joining us at the Carrot and the Stick with Garrett and Keith. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, guys.